Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. To begin, I'd like to quote Malcolm Forbes. Education's purpose is to replace an empty mind with an open one. My name is Asad Lalji, and welcome to Art Futures, Creating Future Stakeholders in Art, brought to you by the NGMA Mumbai, Ministry of Culture, Government of India, in association with Avid Learning. This program is a continuation of Avid's collaboration with the NGMA, and we'd like to thank Mr. Kenneth and his team for giving us this opportunity. Today's discussion is on how we teach future generations to view and process valuable cultural objects like art. Get ready to learn more on how to evaluate the changing landscape of art engagement, art education, patronage and consumption, and building a cultural ecosystem, including the role of technology in furthering the arts agenda. Our experts today include a celebrated artist, the co-founder of a prominent arts institution, a leading practitioner from the world of early childhood development and education, and an architect, designer, and visual arts aficionado. So without further ado, let me tell you who they are and welcome them up to the stage. Alifia, you go first, as promised. Program Coordinator, Creative Kids, Dr. Alifia Poonawalla. Renowned artist, Jaideep Mehrotra. Award-winning architect and interior designer, Ashish Shah. Co-founder Saffronart, Meena Wazirani. They will be in conversation with journalist and VP Asia at Tina Brown Live Media, Gayatri Rangachari Shah. More about our esteemed and accomplished speakers. Their bios have been handed out to you. You probably have them on your chairs. So over to you, Gayatri. Look forward to an exciting discussion, and thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you all for coming today, and I think it's especially great that you're all here because I believe we're competing with a chain smokers concert at the NSCI. So traffic also must be crazy. It's wonderful to see such a great turnout. And thank you to Avid and Asad for organizing this discussion. Asad already mentioned the topic, which is how we get future generations to engage with art and feel like they have a stake in it. And how can technology further that interaction with the arts? And how can institutions, government, and education further that? I have to say that when I first saw this topic, I thought, oh my God, how can we cover all of this in the time that's been allotted to us? People write PhDs and books on this subject. Luckily, we have an eminent group of panelists, and I want this to be as interactive a session as possible, so I will leave plenty of time for audience Q&A. Please have your questions ready. Before we begin, and I return to my seat, I wanted to just set some context, and I promise this is the most you will hear from me today. If we step back and look at our topic, why is it even important for the future generations to engage with the arts? At a time when the news is dominated by all sorts of horrible events, whether they are natural disasters, missile testing by rogue regimes, murders of those who have differing points of view, growing nationalism, rising inequality, I think 85 of the world's richest have the same amount of wealth as the poorest half of humanity. Does art matter? The very simple answer is yes, of course it does. At a very basic level, art helps us understand ourselves and understand the world around us. It makes us better people. Have you noticed that the control of culture is the first thing many governments and dictatorships try to dominate? If you recall, the Taliban destroyed the Bamiyan statues in 2001, and ISIS has wrecked many Syrian monuments. Going further back in time, Stalin had all of Ukraine's folk poets executed. In Chile in the early 1970s, when Pinochet came to power, muralists were arrested, tortured, and exiled. 5 years ago, China arrested and demolished Ai Weiwei's studio. And of course, most recently in the United States, Trump has proposed abolishing the government-funded National Endowment of the Arts. In India, of course, we've had films and books banned, nowadays reference to the Mughals is apparently being removed from our history books. Why is this? Because if you destroy the art of the past, you can reinvent history. And as you know, by controlling art and culture, you can silence dissent and further propaganda. So what does art do? It helps us live fuller lives. Civilizations are judged and remembered not by their most successful businessmen, but by the art they leave behind. So said the actor Kwame Kwei-Armah. It gives us, in the words of the novelist Hari Kunzru, the tools for living, to delight, to console, to engage, challenge, and revitalize. Think about it. The last time you read a fantastic book or saw a great film or heard a piece of music or a magnificent play or a wondrous work of art, it must have moved you and fulfilled your heart with great joy. As a parent to young children, and there must be quite a few of you fellow parents here, I know the importance of inculcating a love for the arts. After all, we have a magnificent tradition in this country. Even though I spent a lot of time outside India, in my few years here, my parents ensured we learned Indian classical dance and music, which most of us continue to do with our children. In Mumbai, we're lucky to have museums and galleries that give us access to old and new forms of art, and to old and new ways of looking. And art touches rich and poor alike. I'm sick of hearing that art is some elitist pursuit. In India, art can be found in the humblest of homes, where even the smallest places of worship are beautifully decorated, in the rangolis outside the kacha homes, in how we paint and decorate our mud walls. Art has the potential to increase interconnectedness, empathy, and compassion across the world. It is one of the great sparks for debate, and debate leads to change in thinking. The noted Danish artist Olafur Eliasson, who is well known for his massive art installations, once said that these days, as politics, business, and finance are losing people's trust, artists are retaining it. Culture has the highest public trust level of any economic sector. On that note, let me ask each of my panelists, what would you do if you were made the Minister of Culture in the Government of India? What are the top actions you would take to reinvigorate the art space and get future stakeholders interested in the arts? Maybe we can just start.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'd like to start by stating a few facts. Art education has an enormous potential to benefit learners and even communities. And keeping this potential in mind and knowing that it has a global perspective, and it needs validation and collaboration from a lot of stakeholders. The UNESCO in their World Conference in 2006 stated that art education is the key to human development and culture. And then in 2010, the UNESCO laid goals for art education. So it's so important and recognized worldwide as being so important. So if I was the cultural minister of India, the first thing I would do is make art education mandatory in all schools in the urban and in the rural area, because I believe what you sow is what you reap. So start from when they're really young. Have many more art institutes, because we have so many medical and engineering institutes, we don't have as many art institutes. Again, there is art. We need excellent teachers, so we need a kind of design, or a kind, like how we have, an idea for different levels and different grades of arts to be taught. Maybe there should be a program for teachers to take that through. And maybe develop a lot of more community centers, because art is also like lifelong learning. So it's even important for the aged, for the disabled, and so many people can benefit if there are many more community art centers all around India. Thanks.
So if I was to be the cultural minister, I think a couple of points I would take into note. First is increase India's soft power. I mean, every country has a soft power quotient, and we don't even rank in the first 30 in the world. So that should be number one.
How would you propose to do that?
By a couple of other things, like I'll list them down. First of all, digitizing museums. Every museum in the country should be digitized. Every object in the museums should be digitized so that we know what we have in the country, and that also stops smuggling, thefts, and things like that. It should be on a server where it's accessible for each and every one, which also helps tourism. Also helps curators within and outside the country to curate shows in categories. For example, if I want to do a curated show on, say, the bronzes of Chola, I know exactly which piece there, and also it gives us a key insight into what we don't have. So if we need to buy something as a country from international auction houses where most of our objects are, actually the best objects are all around the world, we know how to bring it back, and we just don't spend money on the wrong things. I think the second one would be bring culture as a subject, not only art, culture. And when I mean culture, I mean things like the history of arts from pre-Mughal to everything, like all of that, and make a textbook. So create a committee which says that this is what the subject should be in the culture textbook, which goes from, say, grade 1 to grade 10 and beyond, if needed. And that becomes an important subject, because right now what happens is that art is limited to the privileged few schools, right? So if you're in IB, if you're in that curriculum, you have art as a subject, you're taken to museums, but that's not the way it should be. It should be culture, it should be written, it should be, there should be exams on it, so it goes to the lowest denominator of schools. I think that would be a second point I would go to. Third point would be make policies like Make in India, make another policy like Handmade in India, where we talk about, a good example is wool mark, which New Zealand did. They patented it. They made rules and regulations for it, and if you comply by that, there are tax benefits, export benefits, import benefits, skill benefits, all of that, which enables the labor, the craftspeople to go further. Also, that would increase. That would also mean that would remove the middleman, where the money goes directly to the craftspeople and not to people in between. By doing that, also a second thing that's very important is, I don't know if many people know, but we don't patent our words and our culture and crafts. So, for example, Jamevar, Basmati, Neem, the three things I know are patented by the West, and we can't use it ourselves now anymore.
I think Basmati, we won that case.
Yeah, so maybe Basmati we won. But so, but why are we waiting for the West to take it over, right? We should be the first people to patent this. So as a cultural minister, I would first get all these names patented up. There should also be craftspeople and craftsperson using the Aadhaar card, giving them benefits of taxation if you're in the crafts or in the artisanal this thing. So also which benefits us in a way that we can track them down, and if we know there are pockets of crafts around the country, use them as tourist destinations, so which increases the tourist generation of the country. Another thing would be create an aesthetic committee. So for example, the Kala Ghoda statue that sits right outside, if anyone's noticed, it's completely disproportionate. Who's commissioned this? And who is giving 3,600 crores to build a Shivaji statue right in the middle of the ocean, where none of us know who's the designer of it, right? So that's a serious point. That should be a committee that looks into this, and I think I shouldn't be the cultural minister. I think I'll be shot dead soon.
Hello, everybody. I think what's going to happen is we are going to probably have cross points, because a lot of the things are similar. To add to what Ashish was saying, I think it would be very interesting to have another institute like NCPA, which has all the arts represented there. And you would have music, dance, painting, photography, but much larger.
And more open to kind of not a controlled thing, but a little where people can put in applications and then get selected from, the kind of thing. The other point I would say is that we need more exposure to arts from abroad, so that people here locally can see what's happening in other parts of the world. So maybe they used to have the ICCR or whatever, where they had equivalent, they would get musicians and all, but nothing to do with painting, nothing to do with sculpture, nothing to do with any of, none of the visual arts, except movies they've started now. So we need some aspect of that. And likewise, also to showcase the Indian art in other countries. Because I think we have a lot of talent in this country.
The problem with that is, we have a lot of policies that are a problem in India. For example, if there's any object that's 100 years old or more, you can't even take it out of this country because it comes as a non-exportable items. So which is another point, actually, sorry I missed it, is to change the impression of India to the West. If you've seen what India, the last two major hit films from Hollywood, be it Slumdog Millionaire or the recent one, Lion, it shows India as a poor, begging country, right?
The point is we are very...
No, but why, I'll tell you why, Gayatri. The point here, and it's an excellent point that he's made, is that we are not allowed to take our culture outside this country, right? So if we can't take the V&A, the most important wing of the V&A, and put the best of bronzes under one room, how is the world supposed to know this is India?
Well, I think if anybody remembers, and if anybody remembers the Festival of India that Mrs. Gandhi, Pupul Jaikar had put together when sort of India was, finally coming out of some kind of retreat or whatever it was, I think that that actually was a very good example of how the arts and culture of India was shown in various capitals around the world. Unfortunately, after that initiative, which was really driven by Pupul, nothing really has happened in a major scale. Now you have private initiatives, which we can come to later, at the Arts Institute of Chicago or at the Met and things like that. Anyway,
like you said, we need that exposure, but we also have a fantastic team of people working here. If you see the museum, Anupam is here front, his team is fantastic what they're doing, but how many people actually go there and see what it looks like today, what they've done with it, and how they've restored all of the stuff. So maybe in one sense, you get people, via video media or whatever it is, to come and see, and if you can't send them out, at least get people to come here and see what level of museums we have here.
As you said, I think it's going to be a lot of, there are a lot of common points here, so I think mine may end up sounding a bit like a summary, but my perspective on this is a little bit different because not having grown up in India, I think for me what was amazing coming here as an adult was to just look around and say, wow, this is where I've come from, this is what I've got, this is what we have, and no one knows about it. No one celebrates it, no one talks about it, no one takes ownership of it. And to your question terrified me, which is why I made notes. But no, I seriously, I think what's incredible and what I would do if I were the culture minister is really take this opportunity to present India and Indian arts and culture to the rest of the world. It is time for us to be the arbiters of our own quality. I don't think, it's fantastic that you have, an incredible collection at the Met, or that, you've got fantastic classical Indian art, at the Boston Museum of Fine Art, or the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco, but the point is that at some stage we've got to say, look, that's not all that there is. Those are pieces that went out of India. Look what we've got here. And it's, there's art, there's architecture. You can refer to the rasas that cut across different, different aesthetic mores. But so I think definitely that would be the main objectives. But as far as what I would do more tactically, I think the most important is encourage philanthropy. And I think encouraging philanthropy through tax incentives and private and public partnerships is critical, because what will that do? That's going to actually help us build institutions. Going back to the point that everybody's made, that we need institutions. Why? I think that's really the question is, if we don't, what's going to happen is, for the next 60 years, we're going to continue to talk about what our Indian identity is, because we won't have the institutions, we won't have the structures to be able to say this is who we are, this is where we've come from. This is why contemporary Indian art or modern Indian art is not derivative. We have a completely different context that you may not know about, and this is what it is. So I think that's particularly important.
Not as a government, but as a private thing would work?
Absolutely. I mean, let's just look. All around the world, the best museum, certainly in the U.S., the best museums are private museums. You know, I mean, MoMA, the Met, the Asia Society as an institution, these are all private institutions. No one remembers, to your point, that quote that you said when you were speaking, no one remembers that the Rockefellers, were out to kill off Noble Oil. I mean, that's how all of this happened. I mean, no one remembers them for unethical business practices, right? They're known for the foundations they built and the art they put out there and the institutions they put forward. So I think that sort of downplaying the private side of it is a mistake, especially in India, when I think private enterprise is trying to do quite so much. It needs the encouragement, and it needs the incentives to do so. So definitely I would say private. The second is to develop an education policy and structure funding, which can be public and private funding. I mean, for example, the JJ School of Art, just here in our own backyard. I remember there was a great initiative that Sangeeta Jindal had started, of Friends of JJ School of Art. And so we had all gotten together to sit on that board, and it was to help renovate parts of the school and provide resources. And we, as an organization, offered to help do the library, provide computers, provide technology, bring in speakers, to your point, bring in speakers from other parts of the world. But we just couldn't, because...
we're doing the same thing with public sculpture. Like, Goenka has started this initiative to do public sculpture all over the city. My sculpture, which I did for them 3 years ago, is still moving around because there's, the politics is getting involved, and they're saying, oh, they put it there, they give them permission in writing, and then some other committee comes up and says, you can't have art here. So they move it out, and it goes somewhere else. And it's moved 3 locations already. And there's nothing they can do. They're just waiting. So even if you do put in the money, even if you do have the people who have the means to put all this thing together, you need government support for other things like this.
You too. I mean, I think definitely you've got to have that policy, the infrastructure policy that goes with it. But that's why I feel a public-private partnership is important. Yeah. Oh, this is a long story. No, I'm just kidding. But it really goes back to this issue, is that it will be minor roadblocks which have to follow a certain policy. For example, there may not have been the right slot available for students to come and listen to an artist like Raza speak at his alma mater. I mean, and how engaging for those students to listen to someone like him. Or if we were going to provide computers and internet connectivity, which only happened very recently there, they were concerned about who was going to fund it, even if there had been private sponsors providing the funds for it, for no gain, simply to help spur a lot of the educational pursuits that the students are trying to engage in. So, it's those kinds of roadblocks, which is why I say if there is a public-private partnership, we won't feel that dearth of funds, and I think there's a contribution to the process as well. The third point, and I think Ashish touched upon this, which is to to really focus on cultural tourism. Sorry, am I shouting into this? I mean, if I just stop to look, and again, this amazes me. I mean, the Venice Biennale attracts, over 500,000 people a year, approximately. You have the Angkor Wat Temple in Siem Reap in Cambodia, which attracts about 1 million visitors. There's Borobudur in Central Java in Indonesia, which attracts about 4 million visitors a year. There are the three Met museums in New York that attract over 7 million visitors a year. And all the London museums combined last year attracted 125 million people. I mean, it's, when you talk about that sort of cultural tourism, where we have destinations and sites that, date back to the 9th, 10th, 11th century, which are very important, that we may not be preserving in the same way, that we're not building that ecosystem around.
So I think one of the key factors to build tourism around culture, and I really feel is build a hero, right? Today, why do people know the Louvre? Because of Mona Lisa. It might not be the best painting in that room, in that gallery, but definitely building a hero. And India is the worst at that. We don't build heroes. We don't build influencers. We don't. Today, Silicon Valley itself has become a tourist destination because of Mark Zuckerberg. Right? Like something which is not even a monument has.
I think we have the population to support it. But
Absolutely.
Even if our own, people appreciated our arts, we would have so many more visitors to our museums and sites. We don't even need people to come.
Yeah,
from
but
abroad.
the thing is, no, we need people. I actually feel we need a lot of people to come abroad because it brings in a lot of economy. First of all, this whole idea of double entry charge should be kind of re-looked at because it kind of puts people in a very awkward position.
Indian versus the, I think they do that
No,
for a very
but
basic reason.
yeah, I understand. But then have a system to this, right? So if you can figure out a system, there's systems all around the world. Make it free for people. Do things. Make days that are free for Indians.
Yeah.
Like
Or
you
say,
can.
make it as a donation.
Yeah, make it as a donation. Like you donate that. But this, when someone enters itself, it looks discriminative.
Although, can I just say the Met's thinking about doing this, where if you are in New York or if you're from New York, you can pay whatever you want. It's a donation.
Yeah, exactly.
Although now, if you're out of state, you have to pay $25. So,
Yeah.
but the poor sort of guy standing there checking is going to say, all right, show me your papers. Are you a New Yorker or are you not? What are you going to do? Show your tax returns? I mean,
No, show an ID. But the thing is also building IDs, right? So there are cultural IDs all around the world. We don't have that. As I said, I think the basic idea goes back to the form of point of digitizing everything, right? Every object and every museum, private or public, should be digitized. And I think it looks really like a large task at hand, but trust me, if we don't do it, we'll soon realize that most of it is smuggled out of the country.
Yeah. So actually, Ashish, you were just in Delhi, and you were there for the Niti Aayog, sort of program. So can you tell us a little bit about that? We have a minister of state at present who's the culture minister. We don't have a full-fledged minister. Even in the UPA time, Manmohan Singh had the culture ministry, and I don't think very much happened with it. And then, of course, someone else took it over. So, I mean, how serious do you think Delhi is about culture?
Yeah, I mean, we all have our opinions about the government at this point, and rightly so, including me. I was invited by Narendra Modi and his cabinet to present and to be part of this Niti Aayog. Where Mr. Amitabh Kant, on my arrival, gave me two these big files and said, study it for tomorrow morning. And these were files of policies. And then the first thing they tell us is that to make a policy will take us 15 years. But to change a policy is very quick. So all we need to do, actually, and it's a very clever idea, is to just look at our policies and make minor tweaks and changes. So, for example, what he said is a policy factor, right? So if there was a policy in place saying that if there is a blah, 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 and there needs this much 10 meters this way around, this needs to be an art space, right? And now you can use a PPP to bring in funding, and the government will support you with permissions, right? And if you can make it self-sustaining, yes, you can go ahead with this. So if it fell into a format, the problem in this country is there's no format, there are no regulations, there are no rules. And if there are rules, there are always ways to bend it. So how to make this watertight is what Niti Aayog is trying to do. And the first thing what we want to do is increase India's soft power. Because once we increase that, we have a very, very, very large chance to bring in extreme international fundings from institutions, not only private, but from the world over, to change the way perspective, to change the way people look at India and funding for culture.
So you're saying overseas funding for culture?
Absolutely. And the thing is that if one such organization comes in, it will be a benchmark for a lot of Indian corporates.
So how was, is this something that they're taking very seriously?
Absolutely. I think there are lots of things at hand. And then obviously once we make a presentation, the government comes up with another idea saying that, we should create every person is a tour guide in India kind of a concept where, which for me it was like, after we spoke so much, this all you took back. So obviously we had our arguments with the government and we were like, we were refuting, we were fighting against them. But the idea that they come up is like, okay, if you are at a tourist destination, you can put up a selfie and a 1-minute video and you become the tour guide for India. I'm like, that's not what the world is about, right? I mean, the first thing you're going to see is the production value of that and you're going to show how shoddy it is. There are things very important that we already have. Like, for example, we have a museum at the Taj Mahal that nobody knows in Agra, in the same compound. And why have we not used that to our advantage to show the world digitally how the Taj was built, what was the history behind the Taj, what is the crafts that went behind the Taj, what are the myths and reality about the Taj, right? Because there's so many, they say they cut off the hands, all of that. Why is that not being made the hero of all of that? You see? So that there are lots of issues which once when you put down to paper, you can actually figure it out. But the point is no one wants to do that.
So actually I'd like to bring Alethea in now. Alethea, you deal, I hope everyone can hear me. Alethea, you deal with children on a daily basis and about this subject. What has your experience been taking children to museums, galleries? How engaging is the experience? And tell us a little bit also about how important the impact is of early childhood development with the arts.
Okay, so to start off with taking them to museums, I feel it's a lot of dependent on the person who's actually taking them, but how interesting they make it, make them think about different aspects, tell them history in a really interesting way. But I'm really glad to know that the museum has really changed and they're making things much more interactive than they were our Prince of Wales, the Chhatrapati Shivaji Museum. So they've actually changed from the times we were small and we visited the museum and there was no one around to show us anything. The people who do interact with children, there are little things they can do like make coins and make small miniatures, and so it's become more interesting. They're really having more workshops that are organized once a month for children, for lots of different arts, different kind of arts that are being, like the batik and the tie and dye and a lot of different things that are coming along. What I think art education as for the early childhood, I think it's extremely important, and it's like building blocks to develop a child's for the child development, because it really helps their creativity. So I think this is something for the future. We want people to be creative, to think on their own, to think independently, to problem solve. We want them to be, have that kind of inventive nature. So when children deal with art, they kind of get the quality of making things on their own without being structured. And that brings about a lot of inventiveness, which is what is the call for the future. You don't want people to follow direction. You want them to be really thinkers and think independently and creatively. So I think art is amazing at that level.
But also I think, Also I think, we need some people from our traditional arts to talk about how they do things in their own villages, how they do things.
It's very important because it has to be hands-on. Learning has to be hands-on.
I remember I did a workshop with some from Madhubani painter, and his perception of everything was so different. He said, for example, when we were kids and we saw somebody giving a demo, we'd ask him, what is this material you're using? How did you manage to get this line? Today, when people look at my work, the kids, the first question they ask is, how much does it cost? So they're not looking at that thing.
Yeah, it's a process, right?
Yeah, but his philosophy was passed on from, he says, my grandmother passed on the basic philosophy, which is that we work with natural materials. So he said, we don't use anything that you can eat, you don't use anything that you buy, and you don't use things that you pluck from trees. So there was a natural process of how they adapted their own painting techniques from things that they found fallen on the ground and made things up. I mean, these are the kind of things that children now can learn from a lot of, but you need people to encourage.
And it carries on, it's lifelong. I mean, what you've learned as a child stays with you, and then you're interested in that, so you pursue that and you look at that differently.
So I think what Ashish was saying, which is this digitization, if you actually digitize some of these processes, all our processes, that could also be a great learning tool. On that point of digitization, Minal, I want to switch tacks a little bit and talk about technology. Saffron Art, of course, has been a pioneer in the use of technology and opening up the market to a whole new range of buyers and collectors. So how do you see technology playing a role in building more engagement with future generations and frankly even, the current generation?
I think that's really, really important going forward. And I thought Ashish brought up a great point about digitizing things, because what it actually does is it all of a sudden, I mean, it's really why we created Saffron Art in that sense. It does two things. It provides access and it creates transparency. So all of a sudden, there's this information out there. Anybody can access it. There's this real democratization that takes place where you as an individual are empowered to make a decision and act on things, and how you learn about it, how you view it. But more so, I think what I see happening with technology is it's breaking down. I mean, if I were to look at it in different realms, for example, with institutions, since we were talking about that earlier, I think what it does is it breaks down some of the geographic barriers. I mean, just because you happen to be sitting, in Pune, or you happen to be sitting in a small village in Italy or wherever, it shouldn't. I think what technology will do is it won't preclude you from seeing some amazing works of art, experiencing different cultures. I actually think the next wave of what we will see is around sort of augmented reality and immersive reality, and I think that fabulous. I mean, there's so much work being done around it. And I've been part of a small project with it and experienced it. It's incredible. I mean, you would literally go into a little cubicle, I mean, now the issue with a lot of this augmented reality is you're tethered to a computer. But I think pretty quickly, I would say I'm not the expert, but I'd say within 5 years, you will have untethered experiences, which means you put on a headset or you put on the goggles or whatever it is you do, and you're in a cubicle and you can walk through the key works, 10 best works at the Louvre, or you can experience, the pyramids in Egypt. You can, be able to view monuments or sculptures that may have been demolished. I mean, to your point about what the Taliban destroyed, so I think that's really one of the most important places we're headed. The concern that's often expressed about that, though, interestingly, in digitizing things is, does that mean we're going to end up with a bizarre sort of set of partnerships around technology? Are we going to end up with a Gagosian MoMA or a Google Tate? And that's, I mean, I'm just throwing it out there, but it really is a point of discussion, because what do we see happening? Yes, there will be this transparency. Yes, there will be the access. Yes, you can sort of go out and see it in a different setting, in a different environment. But what is it going to take to get there? And if that's what you're seeing without physically being there, you assume that that is reality. And when you assume that that's reality, there's a lot of room to, going back to what we discussed earlier, there's a lot of room to influence what that reality is.
It sounds like the world of Twitter right now.
Yeah. So that's, I think, if I were to look ahead, that's what it's about. But in the short term, I think really what it's going to be is about engagement, as you said. What's interesting is the big question, I think, for a lot of institutions, for a lot of private enterprises is, how much of art is sort of that passive interaction, and how much of it is active engagement. And when we look at the world today, when I look at sort of not just millennials, I look at, my kids, all of us, it's almost as though if you couldn't capture it on your iPhone, it didn't happen. And that, I'm smiling as I look at Ashish. But and what that means is, everything that people see and want to do, even with art, is, okay, it's valid if I can engage with it. If I can take a picture and, there's something there. If I can leave my mark. If there's so many interactive exhibitions and sculptures that we now see. So some of it is, I think, those are the ones that people are finding success with. Those are the sort of contemporary works that people are finding that success with. It's one of the reasons also, I think, that art fairs have become so prominent. It's because all of a sudden you've taken what all of us were doing online and through social media, and you've brought it into the physical world, in a sense. Because it's, there's everyone in one place. You can compare. You can talk to everyone else. People are having discussions around what they've seen and what they've liked. So I think this idea of a collaborative platform, but one where everybody comes to the same place, is really where everything is headed with art in the short term.
So actually, that's a good way to ask Ashish, who is our resident social media guru. You know more than anyone else the power of the handheld device. How can, the way that we interact now with the way the phone is so ubiquitous play a role in advancing interests in the arts? And, given that, how can technology help us sort of interact with that art object?
Well, actually, there's no true answer to that. There is no answer to...
You mean we shouldn't your story everything?
You shouldn't story anything, but I feel that said, I'm the last person to say that. But I feel that social media is big. Like, I think we have dual lives now. I think there's one life that's us, and there's a second life that's on social media. Luckily, that can be controlled by you, at least, not by people who have reactions towards you, because we all get trolled, we all get all of that. But that's fine, that's fair enough, no one takes that seriously. What is important to know is that what becomes a famous piece of art through social media. So what you and I might think would be an obvious choice would be completely irrelevant when it goes to social media. So when you talk about art fairs, we would think that the most important Raza or a Hussein would be the star piece, right? But actually it's not. It's some gallery from some corner of India who has just done a big pomegranate, which is the size of 10 feet tall. So there's one guy who's taking a selfie behind, and there are 40 other people doing that same thing. And then that pop has become the art to look at. So it is actually quite twisted, where you can become a voice without having actually any voice. And you're creating noise, but not creating a voice. I don't know if I make sense. There's noise, but not a voice. And I think that's where influencers come in play. So, for example, that's why I would follow, say, an Ai Weiwei, or say a Subodh or a Dayanita on social media, because I feel like their perspective is where I want to look at. I think there are a lot of people, like for me, what I do is I get influenced by a lot of energy which is around social media, and I repost that, and I always put in my own handles, and then I try to reinterpret it in my way. So if I'm feeling a tornado, it would be a tornado that's happening in America right now, and that itself is a catchy image, and that picks up, and that's where I feel the tractions drive in. So social media has a very, very different way of looking at it, but I think it can be used in the right way and can be misused in a very wrong way.
JB, as an artist who was a very early adapter of technology, can you talk about your own experience using it, and also how you feel, whether you feel that that's really the future in terms of how we get people to engage?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So I think when I started, it was 25 years ago. It was a long time. And I thought the first step would be a halfway line. And the halfway line was that I wanted to do prints which were done on the computer, completely works that were done. There was no machine to print them here at that time. So I actually flew to New York and got them printed and brought back here. And then I released a catalog on a CD-ROM. So they were, you know, very radical for that time. And the reactions that I got to it was that, you know, this will never work. You know, there's no tangibility to this medium, and, you know, who would possibly use them? Nobody would imagine that 25 years that every gallery, I mean, galleries used to say, who would buy this stuff and why would you buy digital stuff when you can get painted stuff? But today they are, and they're buying a lot of it. And similarly, even new materials that are coming in, I keep on discovering new materials, trying to, like you heard about Anish Kapoor buying the Vanta Black. So that's completely new. It didn't exist. But what it can do and how you can perceive the work of art with that material incorporated. Of course, well, it's a black that is so black that if you were to paint this room with that material, you would lose sense of where you are. You completely lose, there's nothing, there's no light. What it does basically is the microfibers that absorb all the light and bounce it all inside it. So there is absolutely nothing visible. Of course, everybody would say, wow, it's not that simple to apply. You need machines and, you know, it can't be done on a small surface. But Anish Kapoor, who's an artist, bought over that, the rights to use that material, and no other artist can use it. There's a big uproar all over the world about it. Because after all, it is a pigment, and it is something that a lot of artists would be able to use in different ways, not necessarily the way he would use it. So technology has its advantages, but it also has some disadvantages. One of them is that till today, they're not able to show metallic stuff with digitization. If you see something that is a chrome-plated or a shiny medium, it looks flat. You cannot see it. There are some advantages. I met a museum director in New York a few months ago when I was there, and she mentioned to me that from now onward she wants to do only shows which are digital, because she said, I don't have the problems of insurance, transport, all the rest of it, and we can ensure that the copyrights are in place. So there are pros and cons to everything.
I think, I mean, just to add to that, I think there is a balance. You know, there's, when you talk about technology, I think it's great to have the access, and it's great to sort of have art and culture and aesthetics and all of these various elements on tap. But I think there has to be some, I think there's got to be some personal introspection when it comes to looking at this. I mean, when you talk about soft power, it's incredible how you can be bombarded by these images and you believe that is what it is, you know, that's amazing. But I think going back to your earlier point, what's important is being able to distinguish between, and yours as well, is being able to distinguish between that noise, as you call it, and the clutter, versus what reality is. You know, what is your opinion on it? What do you think about it? What is your belief? So, and just to come back full circle, in a sense, the role of a museum is in some ways also to elevate, to give you a place to elevate your thinking and to learn and to absorb. And in having that, you know, I think that's where some of the technology gets balanced out. Will it be as engaging? I don't know, but there's a constant tussle, I think, in the last 10 years. I mean, it's one of the reasons you see that the largest number of visitors to the Met, for example, was for an exhibit on fashion. Right. And at the V&A, it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliantly put up. I mean, it was, you know, there was a dome with the detail of the fabric and the embroidery projected up. You walked in and there was this magnificent gown. It was breathtaking. It really was a work of art. But having said that, is there the same kind of sort of magnificence of display given to perhaps to a really important, Gandhara sculpture? Probably not. you know, and there are ways to certainly showcase that. But irrespective, I think that is the general direction the museums are going in with this tussle and with trying to engage with people. Again, going back to your point, is it's driving up the number of visitors, because the more people that talk about it and the more people that post it and the more people that engage with it, it becomes a sort of a leisure and entertainment point.
Yeah, and for all those who go to see the Costume Institute's exhibit, maybe a handful will peel off and see some of the other galleries at the Met. So, you know, that's what you have to hope for.
Or the V&A, for that matter.
Yeah, right.
And they've done some fantastic shows. You know, who would have expected a museum to have an exhibit on Pink Floyd?
Yeah.
You know, so it's,
Alifia, in this fast-paced world that we live in, where all the kids only know how to swipe and don't know what a touch phone button is like, how do we get technology to help them? Is it, this is like an iPad, iPhone generation. What do you feel?
The importance, I mean, how
How can they connect?
So, like they said, visiting museums, there's the Google Art Project, which helps you visit, I think, 100 museums and a lot of art galleries. Like he said about the artist, you could actually have a Skype with an artist, maybe who's far away, telling them about how he creates things and does things. So I think those are important ways of engaging them, because when they visually see it, it's much more beneficial than just kind of talking to them or reading. Yeah. So it's nice, like those things can be used, and also certain games and all of that makes it much more interactive. I think there's like Minecraft, and there's so many other things that are coming up which actually then makes them think. And
my daughter who's 7 uses an app which is all about Western classical music, and she's learned a lot about Western classical music thanks to this app. And I think I happen to have found this, so I downloaded it, and I think that's one avenue, especially, and perhaps this is something we need to develop as India, Indian apps that teach Indian classical music or dance that can then be shared with people from around the world, and so that they can understand and, have their children consume it.
I also have one more point here, is that, with our kids going into apps and swiping left, swiping right, swiping up, pressing down, do they have motor skills?
I should hope so.
But there was a study that came out that said in another 15 years, our children will forget how to write.
Yeah. Or build with hand, right? When we were kids, we would go into the sand and build something on the beach, and and then we would be engineers and architects of our own right in that moment. Get your hands dirty. Yeah, but technology will kind of push that down, right? So I think there should be an age limit at where you start giving your kids these things, right? Because I think till a certain age, I think kids should not be given technology, because they should learn without technology and should learn.
Like Steve Jobs, I think that was.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what.
Also,
Steve Jobs said, but
I
just
don't
feel
think you
it's
have
relevant.
any teenage children. Yeah.
No, I said
I'm just
age
kidding.
limit,
I'm
right?
kidding.
So
I'm
mean,
kidding.
after a certain age, yes. But I think also I feel that when you speak about the art, I mean, I'm a collector, and it's really sad to know that India does not produce artists. I don't know the last young Indian artist that I can go and buy at a gallery today and be like, wow, this is the future. It's really sad, because I feel that we do not take becoming an artist, and I don't know, Jaideep can elaborate on this point. Becoming an artist is almost like not taking your career seriously. We do not expect or even want our children to be artists. I think that's something like, oh, if you're learning art, it's now become you're an illustrator. You're not an artist. So now get a job at a startup or go into an advertising firm and just be an illustrator. So the whole idea of motor skills will die, because there will be no professions that will gear that.
Jaideep, you agree with that? How tough was it for you when you became an artist?
It still is tough. It doesn't stop. I think all the artists will vouch for that it every day is, we hope that people will begin to understand and venture out and try something new and, understand really where we are all coming from. And it's true that I would not encourage my children to do it, even though they want to do it, but they're doing it on their own. I keep telling them, listen, you have to be prepared that it's going to be a tough ride. It's not easy. But what the sad part of all this is, India has fabulous skills which have been passed on from generation to generation. I mean, today's Zakir Hussain, for example, his father, grandfather, I mean, the whole sort of genre of, learning that art passed on from one child to the other. The gharanas, and even in arts, even in painting, techniques, weaving, some of these, like the ikat or whatever, they passed on from generation. The next generation says, listen, I want this job to go and work in a, IT company and earn faster. Why should I bother with this hard work?
So on that note, on that light-hearted note, I think we can open it up to audience Q&A. May I just request you to just say your name and please ask a question.
Ashish, I'd like to continue from where you left off. You said that it is really sad that you haven't seen any young Indian artists, really good Indian artists. First of all, sorry, let me just complete the question. How do you define a good artist to begin with? And second thing is, because that's something that I've been asking myself after going to India Art Festival for 3 years in a row, and seeing a lot of young Indian artists, by the way, but somehow they're not getting appreciated. So how do you define a good artist, and where do you break that?
I knew I was getting into this.
You asked for it.
Well, I'm ready for it. So I feel, it's a very, very relevant question, and I think the answer lies not with me, but the answer lies with the market, actually. And I think Meenal will back me up on this. We see, as collectors, we see, we are always in the lookout for a good young artist, right? I mean, definition of a good young artist in itself is a fallacy. Like, how do you define that? Because for me, what is good is bad for somebody else, right? But I think there is some kind of barometer that we see, and we see a spark, right? Like, so for example, the last time I walked into a gallery and saw an exhibition, I'll give you an example, of Sahej Rahal, right? I said, hey, this is interesting. And actually, not even in the gallery. I saw him I saw his work put outside in a group show at, when the Mumbai Gallery Weekend happened at the Land's End. There was a classroom thing, and there was 2 objects, and I remember Shri and me said, listen, these are damn nice, we must pick it up. And then happened the solo, and then he became this artist. But I knew at that point that this guy is interesting, right? Similarly, I was at the Dhaka Art Summit, and I bumped into this work which I saw in a group exhibition. It was just these graphite panels folded, and it happened to be Aisha Sultana, and I was the first one to buy her panels. And eventually, now she's become a star, right? But the fact of the matter is that I think due to course of time, I think our eyes train ourselves to spot something that says this is something interesting, if not great. The problem is that A, education, B, I have in my own company artists, students and apprentices, and actually artists who studied as artists, who studied art and fine arts in Goldsmith and whichever university, coming and doing furniture, right? So my question to them is, why are you doing this? They say, but who is going to buy our art? The galleries don't want us, right? Because they don't think we're commercial enough. So if there is no platform for this, A, they're not going to be creating more artists. As I said, they all become illustrators, or they join art-related, but they join art-related professionals, right? Coming to the question of what is good art, I think that I should not be answering, because I don't think I'm in the capacity to answer that. But I feel that I buy art which kind of works with my aesthetic and my bracket of what is good. I don't, yeah. Does that work?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Same thing. You mentioned that when a child looks at memory, grassroots question at the end of the day. I mean, because you're saying that artists are taking professions as illustrators, etc. But you know.
Can I just delete on this one sec? Okay.
No, not a debate.
So, I'll tell you this. I don't come from any rich family. I come from very humble beginnings. But I started collecting art when I was in school. I used to save up pocket money and I used to buy art. Luckily, in that time, there was no retail boom, so we didn't have any clothes to buy. So we saved up money. Actually, one of the reasons why art doesn't survive in this country is because there's too much retail. So the youth is not saving any money. So when there's no money, who's going to buy art? And art is on the last of that food chain. Yeah, but again, art, which is the problem, right? Why is art a luxury? Art should be daily. Art should not be luxury. There should be a page in every newspaper talking about art and culture, actually, which they do. But I think art for general art becomes a Sunday story, a Sunday read. Like, it's put on a platform. It should not be put on a platform. That should be basic. And that lies the answer in saying why the cost, right? Because the moment you put it on a platform and say this is luxury, my first question is, can I afford it?
My answer to the other one was another perspective to that. I'm on a board of a scholarship, and what they do is they provide 1 year of free work for an artist who, and Sayed is one of them who we provided that. We selected him. So you were saying that there's not enough talent coming out of it. We went through 2,000 applicants and we picked 5, and it's based on a spark, and like you said, and also the fact that a lot of them, we could tell, are either trying too hard, so they're not achieving what they want, or, and mind you, when they're doing studies like they're in the School of Baroda or in Shantiniketan or wherever they are studying, they are coming out, I mean, JJ School of Art, we haven't, for the last 2 or 3 years, we haven't got anybody coming out of that, because there doesn't seem to be a spirit. I mean, they are doing a college, but there has to be something coming out of there which drives them, but not necessarily.
Lack of faculty as well?
It's a lack of several things. I mean, the fact is the JJ School of Art.
It's not the faculty. The faculty is sort of like aspiring to a syllabus that's better, but it's policies and the art school college syllabus that's lacking, I think.
But aside, I mean, but adding to that, the fact is the JJ School of Art was fantastic at one time because it was a national school. I mean, it was a national university, right? It attracted the best of the best in India, and it is now a Maharashtra university, which I didn't want to get into it too much, but that was one of the reasons we couldn't bring in international speakers. Now, I mean, and that was one of the reasons we couldn't help replace slides that they had from the 1960s where they're teaching about Titian and teaching about color, and all the slides are the same color of yellow and ochre. So, I mean, part of it is the materials, it's all of those things. But I think getting back to a bit of this question is, please, I mean, we have to make a distinction between the quality of art and the way the market for an artist develops. Those really are, those are two different things. Not that they're not intertwined. Of course, the assumption is that the artist creates good art and therefore is, developed by a gallery and moves on and has a large career. But the point is that I would really separate out those two things for sure.
Hi, my name's Viraj. Thanks for the conversation. I think there were some really great points made, and I have a few comments on the discussions going on.
Please limit yourself to a question.
Yeah, just one comment. When you talk about London, there are like 800 plus galleries. When you talk about Chicago, there are like 500 plus galleries, other institutions, art centers. When you talk about Bombay, we just have like about 20 or 30. So in that sense, I feel when you comment on young artists, I feel people run out of opportunities, and there's also not a lot of support from the government. And I don't know if I'm wrong. Y'all can add
what's
on.
Your question?
My question is, if y'all know any resources or something, I don't know, like feel free to share.
Can I? Okay. Oh, sorry. Sorry. I'm glad you asked that question, just because I want to just throw something out. So in 1949, China had 25 museums. Okay, and they set a target. And went through the Cultural Revolution, lost all their art, shipped their best stuff to Taiwan. All of it's still sitting in Taipei. All of that. They set a goal that they wanted to have 3,500 museums by 2015. And they met that goal 3 years earlier than their target. They decided in 2009 that they want, and some of those are private, but a large number are public. They decided in 2009 that they wanted to elevate culture to a strategic industry. And they want, by, I think it's 2020, if I'm not mistaken, they want culture to contribute to 5% of GDP. I mean, that is a big number. So when we look at a country like India, where, you know, much of the art, much of the culture originated, that runs through Asia, through the Silk Route, all the way around, you know, we're up against that kind of government support, that kind of funding, that kind of cultural, economic, education policy. And what we're trying to do here is really, in small bits and pieces, we're trying to sort of, you know, build it up through private enterprise. Just to put it in perspective, if I had to put it down on numbers and value, I could maybe buy one, you know, post-war work, or I could buy up the entire Indian global art auction market. Okay? That's what we're talking about. That's where we are in terms of value. So we can talk about our values have grown, but I could say, you know, I don't know, I am the ruler of Qatar. I could maybe buy, you know, yeah, $100 million, $120 million painting, or I can buy up every work that comes up in every Indian, modern and contemporary Indian art auction over the next 12 months. So where are we?
I want to add to that. What do you do? I knew that was coming. Well, I think what you're trying to ask is where's the opportunity, right? It's very simple. I think patronage, the first point, right? What do we have in India? One Kiran Nadar museum. How many corporates do we have in India? That's your answer, first answer. Wait,
but can I just disagree with that? Yeah. I think patronage was okay leading up through through colonialism and even post-colonial, where there was a lot of contribution. But we should have transitioned by now from patronage to philanthropy. And I think unless we make that transition, we're not going to get there.
I understand philanthropy, I understand patronage. All of that comes under one platform. The second platform that I'm trying to say is there needs to be more, that you as young artists should use social media. This is where you should come into play, right? Where you all need to build a second personality to yourself and see that, look, we have a voice, right? If you have enough followers, and it's not that tough, you all are young, you all have a vision, you all have a viewpoint, create a social media platform where the gallery comes and says, listen, this guy is really big, I need this artist. So I feel that today it's upon the artist and any creative field, being an architect, interior designer, artist, musician, it's upon them to build their own platforms. Today, in the day of social media, you don't need any patronage. So I feel that if you have your own patronage through something as cheap as social media, I think you can build a voice. And then people, if I notice you on social media, 100% I'm going to come to you and message you saying that, come, let's work together.
You know, but I have to, just to counter argue that, I have a friend in Delhi who is a young artist. Well, now maybe she's in her mid-30s or whatever, has had a very tough time. And, you know, I think artists always struggle, so, you know, she's obviously depressed, and, you know, artists need a break. I mean, she's been trying to get a gallery show for a long time, and I'm sure she's not, I mean, you know, she's just one of many. So I think to the extent social media can help, that's wonderful. But I do think that institutional support in some way, shape or form, which is what Lalit Kala Academy, Jahangir Art Gallery, some of these non-profits had done in the past, and we need multiples of them.
But you know, the thing is that, you know, when you don't have it, right? Like, let's face it, we don't have it, right? You have FICA in Delhi, you know, by the Vateras. But there are a few pockets here and there that appreciate young artists and young artworks. But I think on the overall platform, Gayatri, that when we don't have this thing, you have to create your own, right? I feel that today I completely understand why young galleries do not pick up artists anymore. I speak to all the gallerists on a daily basis, and I'm like, why are you not picking up young artists? And they're like, but who's buying, right? So the point is that, one, I just joked about it, but I think the most important culprit here is putting art on a platform, and B, retail in India, which means that so much money is wasted on fashion, which is actually seen on, if I may say so, Bollywood's red carpet, which is AKA airport look. That it's surprising that people would spend 30,000 bucks on a shoe when they cannot afford it, and not save it up to buy an artwork which they actually would enjoy and live with.
And would appreciate it well.
Hopefully.
We have a question on this side.
Hi, I'm Priyal. How do you, I mean, it's a very strong notion because art is luxury. How do you, it's a very broad question.
Art should not be luxury.
Yeah, how do you make that not happen? Like, how do you get art to not be luxury? I mean, it's a very broad question. I don't know if you can answer.
I think the assumption there is, I think when you treat it as not a consumable is the wrong word, but it doesn't always have to be acquired. And I think that's sort of the point that we were discussing, is that yes, it may be expensive to buy, but art is not only about sort of buying high fine art or about acquiring a sculpture or acquiring a painting for your wall.
I actually feel that I had no money, but still I bought art. And today I have a collection. But the point is, I just feel that each one of us, I was telling this to her before, is that each one of us need to value our lives in 100%, right? Like, some people say like, oh, I'm a guy, for me tennis is 60% of my life, and cars is another 20%. And then you ask him what's about art, he's like 0%. But then that person would have walked into a museum in the Louvre just to tick it off his tourist guide look, but that itself is at 1% he's been to. So I think we need to increase the percentage of art in every person's life. I think the moment that, like for example, stepping into a gallery, it can be intimidating for a lot of people. Yeah, even I have gone up to artists and said, I have 5,000 rupees, can I buy this? And they've given it to me. Because I think artists are one of the most open-hearted people. They'll be like, if you appreciate their work, they'll happily give it to you. So the fact of the matter is that I think we need more young collectors in this country. I think we need more voices that come from the youth and the millennials, say, I am proud of buying this, my first artwork on Instagram. I think that will change things.
Sorry, just to follow on to the point that you're discussing, I think the reason why we elevate art is because we need to demystify it, and I think that goes back to the education part of it. I'm a school teacher and I teach English at Bombay International School, and the sad part is we don't have art history as part of our curriculum as well. So if you don't have that love for art, and it's just a compulsory subject until the 6th grade because it's a fun-free period, your perception of art needs to change at the grassroots level. Then only can you have, I mean, Ashish, no disrespect, but you have always been interested in art, right? It's not the case for most children. It's not the case, and again, there's such a gender divide as well. It's not the case for most boys as well. It's only later on, once they get a corporate job and it becomes a status symbol, and then they want artwork because it looks good and that's what people expect. That's when art becomes important, and it's for the wrong reasons.
That's why I was saying put culture as a subject, as a textbook.
I'd like to add on to that question. So I've studied art history in college in the US, and I also think that demystifying art is incredibly important. And to some extent, I think a large part of not being able to translate it beyond, like, art remains a luxury because in a lot of ways it remains confined to the market and doesn't quite find space in institutions that can be accessed by regular people. And you shouldn't necessarily have to own art to enjoy it. And I think...
Sorry, do you have a question?
Yeah, so my question is, in what ways do you think the professionalization of, say, museum studies or curatorial practice would help contribute to kind of working towards a space where you can access art, where you can have people who work as professionals in the art world?
I think it would just engage. It would just engage the visitor much more. But I'm kind of getting back to the education issue. I think a lot of it, honestly, and you'd be the best person to comment on this, but I think what happens in schools is there isn't, innovation is not rewarded. Taking a risk is not rewarded. When you are in an ICSE system or the Indian system is, you're punished if you ask a question. If you get up and challenge a notion or you challenge what your teacher has said, they say, well, why are you expressing your opinion? If you get up and take a risk and say, well, everyone else might be doing it this way, but you know what, I want to do it that way, that's the kid I want to see, right? So coming back to your point, when you see that spark, that's what you're seeing.
But also I feel is it the way that we're teaching art? I don't know. I don't have kids, so maybe it's changed now, but the way I was taught art, I would snore through it. Right? I was like, draw, but that... But can we make it fun? Can there be like holographic things that come up and say Picasso talks to this class? It's something where technology or something where it makes it interesting for everyone to say, oh my God, it's art class time.
I'm so glad you brought that up, actually, because there's this new film that's been made about Van Gogh. And it's been done by, I think 130 artists have actually, so it's a painted, semi-animated film about his life, and it's just absolutely brilliant. So you're right. It just needs to be more engaging. I don't think it can be just out of a textbook.
Maybe say for example, if you're teaching at BIS and you have this problem, maybe why don't we engage with maybe like say 3 artists from the city, right? And say, come on, let's create a program where we all know that this will be super exciting for my kids. Let's throw like a paper on the floor and tell them, now interpret this. Like they can draw it, they can fold the paper. Let's open their minds to what is art. Like also I think we teach art. Art should not be taught, art should be experienced, And the moment they start experiencing art, they start seeing art in different ways, they feel like, okay, this is art. It's not like, oh, in 1926 this painting was made. Nobody cares if that painting was, if nobody cares for that. But what was that painting about is what's more important.
There's something called loose parts, which we're using in our school with really young children, where we give them varied things, blocks, small pieces of block, twigs, leaves, paper, straws, and we just tell them to assemble it in whatever way they like. So they just kind of design it, put it together, and they create their own art, which they're actually imagining, thinking. And it's so important because, it's their whole creative process, and it's what starts from when they're really, really young.
I say that magic because that actually is a movement in art called arte povera. And if you told the kids that there was a movement after post-war where there was no material for the artists to paint, so they picked up anything and made things out of junk, and found objects, and that was called arte povera. Now that's interesting for me as a kid. Right? I'm like, wow, I can just take a duster and make art.
There's such few people, they're just pockets of few art teachers who really make children think like
I think
many more.
And I think the bigger question, though, coming back to you,
Come on. But I'm not an artist. I can do an architecture work.
But also I think the institute itself has to be open to getting artists from outside to come and contribute.
Schools are really open to it, and I think it's just something that needs to be addressed on a larger platform, because I believe
well, Avid is going to pull that off.
that should be there at a younger age.
And the only art we learn in school
Excuse me.
is the Renaissance and European art. We never learn about Indian art. We don't know any artists. Children can just name maybe 1 or 2, and they can name maybe many European artists. So they need to be more.
I'll come back to you because you asked a question. The lady in red? Oh my God, I'm so excited I said that, lady in red.
Ashish.
I asked the lady in red, and then we'll come back to you.
Thank you. Hi, it's a continuation for the children. So I have a 10-year-old, and every time we travel, we're lucky enough to go to museums all over the world, and I show him things, and he loves it. At the age of 5 and 6, I took him to the Picasso Museum in Barcelona, and I thought he'd be bored, and he actually stood in front of one painting, and it was like a dream come true for me because I studied it. So my question is that when we're abroad, everything is wonderful. We come back here, luckily he has 2-3 chances in one academic year to be exposed to art because he's an IB. But how do we inculcate or further this passion where Indian art is concerned, or where I can take him besides the few visits you can do in Bombay, where it's a continuous process, like you all are saying, okay, digitizing. But what can we do right away to, keep the passion going, which is not just a holiday, thing? So, I mean, from the experts.
I feel like how you visit the library, or if you visit a park or whatever, you could even go to Jahangir Art Gallery if you go often enough. Just let the child walk through, let him interpret what he sees, the colors, let him talk about how he is visualizing art. That's lovely, because like I said, it starts from when they're really young and when they appreciate it. So Jahangir Art Gallery is a wonderful place to...
Actually, there are apps which take you through walks through the city, introduce you to architecture. There's a lot of stuff, but you have to Google it, and if you're looking for something specific, there's an amazing amount of stuff available. Yeah.
Very good evening. My name is Ratan Deep. Ashish, your views are very, very concise. You're talking from, I could understand a lot of deep passion for art that you have. You feel that we should have an artist for the culture ministry? We should have an artist as a culture minister who would be a more apt person to promote?
I think, this question is very, very political in its own way. I think...
We finally got a sports minister who is actually from sports.
Yeah, but I think maybe a curator would be a better minister than an artist, because I think artists are sometimes so involved in their head zone that it just becomes so dramatic. But yeah, actually, Brinda, it's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, just getting back to, from what I said about, changing and trying to make art not a luxury. So I'm an artist, so let me clarify that. I'm not someone who buys art, I'm creating things. And I actually found a lot of people who had that inhibition, who loved my work, but a lot of them who loved it were the masses as against the luxury guys. So, some input about how you can actually ease things up for them and go like, you can maybe buy art and think about it.
If someone says, I like your work, and asks you how much it is for, first, if you're young enough and you can afford it, just say, how much do you want to pay? And I think collecting art is like being a vampire. Once you taste blood, you never go back. So if you create one of that, he's going to come back to you 100 times. So, and that's when you say, okay, now you bought it for 5,000 rupees, this time it's 6,000. Every time go 1,000 rupees more, and then you'll reach a price. But jokes apart, I think if I would find a passionate client or a patron for me, I would do things for free as well. Like for me, I feel that expressing is better than holding on, right? So if you've made a painting, if I was an artist, I'd rather see it on a wall than in my portfolio. So don't be so attached to your work firstly, right? So be open about the fact that even if it's 300 rupees, sell it, because that's a sale. And a sale is important, very important for an artist to survive, right? So, and then build on that, So, make sure that you kind of have people talk about it, say that, okay, I'm selling it to you, but make sure your friends see it, or can you call 5 friends over and can I come and talk about my work? Those are great marketing ways for you to market your art.
Actually, I'm a student of JJ School of Art. I'm just studying in Masters. After a long time, I get back to practicing in the Master's study. The question is, I would like to invite Ashish Shah sir to visit the JJ School of Art especially for master studio, then you can get that things. JJ always producing that qualities artworks 8.
So invite me.
Yes, definitely. Already there, I heard many things, the conversation, those of you. So please do come and see the works.
I would love to actually.
Yes.
Thank you to our speakers for this absorbing discussion, the creating the future stakeholders in art. And you know, I think, you know, a couple of things people have touched on. You know, there's a lot of very interesting stuff happening. You know, especially if you look at Bombay, from this whole cultural consumption, especially for kids, there are lots of very interesting programs. So, you know, you have to just do your research. Besides just depending on, you know, our international visits, there's the Kalagor Arts Festival, which is a wonderful place to expose your kid to various forms of art. And we're looking at art, we just keep talking about visual art, that's also performing arts, so various forms to it. So, sure. Okay.
September 20th is the conclusion, but the 16th there's going to be a new show. It's a tiny space, and you know you should bring your child to come and see that space. It's in the Colaba, third Pasta Lane. Yeah, yes, exactly. And then and Jaideep's show is going to.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Sorry, I stole
So thank you to the NGMA Mumbai, Ministry of Culture, Government of India for partnering with us. Do check out their show of Jitendra Arya, which is downstairs. I think it's open tomorrow. Thank you, audience, for being here, being such an enthusiastic and engaged audience as always. Avid, as you know, does a number of programs. Our next workshop is a fashion photography workshop with Vikram Bawa. The information is out there. Normally I tell you all, you know, stay connected with us, be social, but this room has no Wi-Fi connectivity. But do follow us on social media. Our hashtag is Learning Never Stops, and our handle is @AvidLearning. But you can get more information for us from our website. Thank you for coming. Have a wonderful evening.